Good afternoon and welcome to the Three Rivers podcast for Wednesday, August 28th. I am your host, Ed Troop. Glad you could join us here on Oneberg on our Facebook page, our YouTube page, or maybe you're listening on our Spotify. Again, it's a pleasant Wednesday afternoon, and on my other side of the screen, maybe that way, there we go, is Mr. Don Rebel of the TribLive High School Sports Network. Good afternoon, Don. Glad to have you back on the podcast for the second time this year.
Pleasure to be back, Ed. I always get confused too. You want to point the wrong way, but there's Ed right there. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. We got WPIAL high school football week 1 starting this upcoming Friday night. You're, of course, a big part of that. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And we're also going to talk Pittsburgh Steelers on the podcast today about getting down to the 53-man roster and the start of their season just a week from this Sunday when they go to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. Of course, the NFL season starts 1 week from tomorrow, next Thursday, with the Chiefs and the Ravens to officially kick off the 2024 season. Dawn, before I get into the There, we're back, Dawn. Sorry about that. Lost you for a second.
I was gonna start singing a show tune while you were gone.
No. Don't do that. You could, though. You could. We might get some hits on that. But before we get into the NFL season, I do want to start just with you personally. 25 years you're celebrating covering WPIL high school football with your current outfit and the online streaming of high school football. We know you've been doing it long before that. Started in McKeesport back in the late 80s, probably closing in on 45 years covering the WPIAL or something like that. We won't.
Let's pump the brakes there. I'm not that old.
Maybe 40. I'm not sure.
It's 36. So yeah, we're climbing toward 40.
But 25 years with the current format that started clear back in the year 2000 with the Nauticom Sports Network, which then evolved into the NSN Sports Network, the MSA Sports Network, which was for a pretty long time until recently with the TribLive High School Sports Network that took over within the last 10 years. I've been lucky enough to be a part of all those outfits with you, clear back to the Nauticom Sports days when I was in college. So I've seen you and the others in the cast of thousands that we have on a Friday night covering high school football. But it's not just high school football. It's basketball, it's baseball and softball. It's all the WPIL sports. But I just want to congratulate you on those 25 years, man. And boy, what a great run it's been.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone, I could write a book really of the ins and outs of how this network. It's amazing how this network has survived. But again, it's, I think, a credit to the folks that got it rolling, Alex Panarmius and Nauticom, then Management Science Associates. Again, stepping in once Nauticom pulled the plug, and then when MSA, said, well, we're probably looking to go in a different direction. Here comes Trib Total Media. It is kind of amazing. The one thing that two things actually. The first is you and so many others, whether they have been with us for a couple of years or whether they were with us for most, if not all, of the ride. We've been blessed with so much talent, guys that have other jobs that do this as a side gig, great passion for not only broadcasting, but broadcasting high school sports. This network couldn't have done it without everybody involved. It really has been a team effort. And the other thing that you mentioned is that I just think there's a lot of folks that do this now. And most of it's football, and football's the dog that wags. It's the tail that wags the dog, actually. But football is just a piece of what we've been able to do, and I take great pride in the fact that we have been able to focus and feature so many young athletes in all different sports. We took our WPIL rights holders very seriously, and we were excited to broadcast tennis championships, golf championships, diving championships, the sports that don't get a lot of publicity over the years. So Those are probably two of my biggest things I'm most proudest of in this quarter century run.
And I remember back, I started in 1999 with Bruce Sokolic at WESA in Charleroi, and I had Bruce on the podcast earlier this spring. We actually talked about it for half a second. And I remember he said, "Hey, you got to meet Don Rebel." I went to college with Don. I know Don. Don's starting up this brand new idea of streaming high school audio of our broadcast, not on the radio, but online on the internet. The internet was relatively new, right? Late 90s,
Yep.
Early 2000s. But he said, this is the future of what we're going to do. And that was 25 years ago. And here we are. And I remember being just, yeah, let's go. And of course, I met you and Alex and everyone else at Nauticom, and the rest is history. But yeah, what a thing that has evolved now to the point where, I don't think there's very many games, they're still on radio on some traditional old AM stations, which I think is kind of cool, especially in some of these small communities, Beaver Falls, Washington, Greensburg, places like that. But now it's, about 95%, you're logging on and watching video of these broadcasts on a Friday night.
Yeah, when we began, like you said, it was a radio network. Now, just about everything we do is on video. And I told the story how another colleague of ours, State Senator Rob Matzey, back when he was playing reindeer games with us, he was one of our broadcasters. And I remember he was always sort of, ahead of things tech-wise. And like early 2000s, maybe, when everybody had the flip phones, everybody was starting to get personal cell phones. He said, it's only a matter of time before you're going to be able to listen to our games on these phones. And I thought he was like, he was Dr. Spock or something. He's, you're from the future, I sort of laughed it off. I said, yeah, right. Well, now everybody has, the smartphones, and they're able to watch all of our content on their phones. You don't need to be locked down and listening to a radio or sitting in front of a computer. It's really amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely taken off for the years, and now, like we talked about it, everybody is logging on to a device on a Friday night or during the winter time on a random weeknight, and it's really expanded the coverage of high school sports too. That if somebody plays volleyball or golf or tennis, they're still able to watch and listen to some of those games, and whether it's their own kids or a relative or a next door neighbor, they're able to log on to the TribLive High School Sports Network and find some of that content. So yeah, great stuff. Congratulations, my friend. Here's to 25 more. I saw your promotional piece on the website not too long ago talking about the history, and you said I probably won't be around for those next 25. I might not be either. Who knows? But job well done. The Hall of Famer, by the way, Don Rebel, inducted into the WPIAL Hall of Fame not too long ago.
All right, I'll give you that $10 I promised you if you were singing my praises.
I thought it was like 50, but I'll take 10. Hey, Don, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers in the upcoming 2024 season.
Sure.
The Steelers went 0-3 this past preseason. A little bit of a bumpy ride at times, but again, when we look back at last preseason, when their quarterback Kenny Pickett went 5 for 5 on touchdown drives, the offense looked unstoppable. We came out of last preseason in which they went 3-0, and I thought this team was going to be unstoppable. In week one, they host the 49ers. They get thumped at Acrisure Stadium, and of course, we know the rest is history after that with Kenny Pickett, Matt Canada, and that offense. So this year, a little bit of a 180. They go 0-3. Again, nothing too impressive, nothing really to get excited about. No one really stood out too much. There wasn't too much really to take from a preseason other than the fact that they didn't win a game. What's your thoughts on the 0-3 preseason?
I mean, you just said it perfectly right there. The preseason football in the National Football League has really become extremely insignificant. Other than, the one thing that the coaches want to do is look at some of the young players. They're, when you're talking about roster spots, 48 through 53, there's legit competition in those final games. But outside of getting some reps for some of the starters, it shows you how meaningless it is, and that there are so many players now. You could run down the Steeler players that didn't suit up and play one down of preseason football. But that's league wide. I mean, there are so many players. Carolina, a team that has really been bad the last few years, and they're a young team. They were resting starters, and you would think a team like that, you'd want to get your young guys some reps. I think we're really closing in on the fact that that you could that we're going to see an 18 game season and limit to 2 preseason games.
Right.
Preseason it means nothing. And your example of last year says it all. So the fact that they really didn't have any major injuries in this camp, I think is really the biggest win of August football for the Steelers.
It's really strange. Previous seasons, I've always watched the preseason games. I've always, just like the regular season games, I've been excited. Even when there was 4, I would still watch.
Oh yeah, I still watch too. Yeah,
live. Well, this year was different for me. I missed the first game the entire first preseason game. I only watched the first half of the second game, and this past week I missed the entire third game. Now, of course, I went back and watched them on replay. But as far as watching them live, I watched one half live of the preseason, and it was that second preseason game.
Oh, you're a busy guy, Ed. I mean, they gotta start to contact you before they set their schedule and say, hey, when are we good to go with the schedule? But most people that I know that are fans don't watch one down of it. They have other things to do. I'm a bit of a loser, so I'll sit there just to watch the young guys, see if anyone jumps out at me. But just try to get through with everybody healthy. That's the big thing. If you haven't lost players either in practice or in these preseason games to either injuries that'll keep them out for several weeks, or unfortunately, in some cases, injuries that will shelve players for the year. If you can get through that, and the Steelers, I think, have. They lost Herbig, who may have been their starting center. But other than that, they like I said, I think it's a big win, 2024 training camp.
Let's talk about the 53-man roster. Cut-down day was this past Tuesday. Yesterday by 4 o'clock, they had to get to the 53. Really, no big surprises here either, Don, when you go through that roster as far as who was cut, who they kept. On the offensive side, of course, we got Russell Wilson. And I want to get your thoughts here in a second about who you think the starting quarterback will be and should be. I think it's going to be Russell Wilson. It's his job to lose.
Well, it is. I think they just came out and made it official.
There you go. Exactly what we thought. Russell Wilson will be your starter next Sunday. They do get Kyle Allen as the third quarterback, not to be confused with Josh Allen, right? Kyle Allen. But they do keep 3 quarterbacks, which I thought was interesting. They've only kept 2 in recent years. This year, they do keep Allen as the third quarterback.
Well, you can have, you can now the new rules, and they've adjusted this rule, is your third, your emergency quarterback doesn't count as one of your 52, 53, 54, whatever they're dressing on a Sunday, but he is dressed and ready to go just in case injuries hit the first 2 guys, and it has to be injuries, can't be bad play. So there is the third quarterback is an emergency back, but doesn't count on who's being dressed. Even though he's dressed, doesn't count as one of your 54 players on game day.
Are the Steelers making the right decision, Mike Tomlin, with starting Russell Wilson in Week 1?
Definitely. I mean, we didn't see a lot of him. He missed some time with the calf injury, but again, I think you know what you're getting with him. He might not be he won't be the Russell Wilson of the Legion of Boom days, but he's still a quality quarterback. He had a bad 2 years ago. It was a bad situation all the way around in his first year at Denver. He did not have a bad year last year. His numbers were pretty good for a team that was less than average in the Broncos. And you compare his numbers to what Kenny Pickett did, it's kind of night and day. I know, before they made the move to get Russell Wilson, And when Chicago made it known that they were done with Justin Fields and he was available, I was on the let's get Justin Fields bandwagon. I like him, but I think that what Wilson gives you is a level of professionalism that I think this offense needs right now, because the offense still is very young. You look at the receiver room; it's a very young room now, since they got rid of Deontay Johnson. So, and we're seeing a transition to a very young offensive line too. So I think Russell Wilson's leadership, little things that he does so well. I didn't think it was much of a competition to begin with, but now that he's healthy, ready to go, I think it's a no-brainer.
Looking at the rest of the offense, no surprises at running back. Najee Harris is your starter. Jaylen Warren, who is banged up, is your second running back when ready. Newcomer Cordell Patterson, of course, the kick returner, the future Hall of Fame kick returner, is your third running back in that group. Now, wide receiver gets a little bit interesting, right? You got George Pickens, Calvin Austin the third, Van Jefferson, who they picked up as a free agent in the offseason. Scotty Miller as well comes in as a free agent. Roman Wilson. They keep 5 receivers, including Roman Wilson, who's hurt. So technically right now they have 4 wide receivers that are healthy. One surprise, maybe a surprise, was Quez Watkins, who they signed from Dallas in the offseason. He gets cut, but he had a rough preseason, especially that first preseason game trying to return a punt.
I think that 3 absolutely dreadful attempts to return a punt. I think that really sealed the deal. I think they were looking for him to maybe carve out a niche there, and then he could possibly make the roster as a 4th or 5th receiver. Didn't work out, so that really wasn't a big surprise either. To me that's a concern.
Right.
And like everybody else, yes, we're sick to death of the Brandon Ayuk hostage situation, day 245. The fact that nothing's been done, yes, there's still a glimmer of hope. But even if that doesn't work out, I think they need to address that. Brian Davis suggested Kadarius Toney. I would not look in that direction. I never was impressed. Yeah,
can't catch,
can't catch, and can't line up on side, and various other things too. Terrible route runner. But they do need to address that, and I would really like to see them address it with a bang. That's why the whole Ayuk situation excited me. I think they need someone with a much stronger pedigree, in case, first of all, to help Pickens on game day, because Pickens is staring right now at a lot of double teams, a lot of bracketing. He's good enough. You could still get the ball to him, but it would open things up if you had a player of Ayuk's caliber on the other side. So I think it's not so much everyone's like, well, let's search the waiver wire. I think that if this whole San Francisco thing doesn't work out, I wouldn't be surprised to see them make a move to get another very strong veteran wide receiver in here before, it might not even be before week 1, but sometime early in the season. I think that room desperately needs another marquee player and a little veteran leadership.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they only kept 5 wide receivers too kind of leaves that door open to bring somebody else in, especially while Roman Wilson is hurt. Now, of course, Roman Wilson has a ton of upside, but we just haven't seen him. He's been hurt most of the preseason, most of camp, and hopefully that won't be a lingering injury throughout the season, because they really want him to be that 3rd slot wide receiver this year.
Yeah, and you're right. There was a lot of excitement once they drafted him. But he didn't get a chance to suit up and dress for any of the preseason games. Van Jefferson is a nice receiver. He fit in nicely in Los Angeles as the number 3. That's kind of what I would like to see him here, as a strong number 3. Calvin Austin, it's still up in the air. He lost his freshman season, so to speak, 2 years ago. He was all right last year in spurts. You'd like to see him take another big step, but will that opportunity exist? I don't know. So there's potential there, but that's exactly what it is. I'd like to have a little bit more than potential for that receivers room.
Looking at the offensive line, they're going to start two rookies with Zach Frazier at center. You mentioned the Herbig injury being out for the season a little bit earlier. And, of course, the first-round draft pick, Troy Fonatanu, will be the other starting lineman member there. And Broderick Jones is only a second-year player coming back. So you have three, two rookies, one second-year guy. And Jones, of course, struggled a little bit during this preseason. Those will be, three linemen that you're going to anchor this line, hopefully, for the next few seasons to come. What's your thoughts on the offensive line?
Well, it's going to be a strength of this club, perhaps even by the end of the season. But Rome wasn't built in a day. Early on, we're going to see some things that, of course, will, the fan base will scream that so-and-so's a failure, so-and-so's a bust, blah, 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 blah. It takes time for cohesiveness on the offensive line. There's so many nuances that I don't think the average fan realizes. They got two strong veteran guards. They got the rookie center, who by all accounts has really outkicked his coverage thus far in Frazier. And then you have what will eventually be two studs at tackle, two young studs at tackle. Now, Fautanu's injury, will he be ready for the Falcons in week one? If not, then you'll see Moore and Jones again, as we saw last year at tackle. But, it's allow for some growing pains, I guess, is my advice, because that has the makings of being a very, very strong unit and a big part of what the Steelers, that mindset, that physical mindset that I don't know that this offense has had for a while.
Yeah, they have definitely lacked being the more dominant line on offense for a number of years, and that's why Omar Khan and that front office tried to address it through the draft the last couple years with three very good, hopefully very good offensive line drafted here in the last 2 years in their top three picks.
I just got word Isaac Seumalo injured, possible pec injury today, so they're evaluating that. That would be a bit of a setback, but I know that speaking of rookies, the McCormick kid they drafted, who they were looking at to possibly get at center, third, fourth round area, if they weren't able to get a top center early on. Well, they got Frazier, but they liked him so much that he is probably a starter in waiting, because I think both Seumalo and Daniels, I believe they're both in the final year of their contract. I might be wrong. I know Daniels is. So the thinking is that McCormick sort of sits and waits behind them and is a starter, maybe as possibly early as next year. Now that might have to change based on this news that's coming out of the South Side, but fingers crossed, because Seumalo is a beast, and if it is an injury, let's hope it's not one that's going to shelf him for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Those pec injuries can be tricky throughout the season. I mean, we've seen guys miss almost the entire season with that type of injury. So, yeah, we'll have to stay tuned for that. Don, on the other side of the football here is the defense. And a lot of people, in the national media, local media, feel very high about this defense going into the season as the strength of this football team. Offense, maybe not so much. We just went through it, lacking especially another wide receiver and a young offensive line, and Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, all that drama at the quarterback position. But on the defensive side, a lot of people very excited about this unit going in. Really no surprises here either. On the defensive line, you got Ogunjobi, you got Adams, Benton, and Hayward kind of anchoring down there. Lil and Loudermilk make the team. They both had very good camps from my understanding. And then at linebacker, we got TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, of course, Patrick Queen, and Elandron Roberts filling in until Cole Holcomb can get back, which they're hoping to get back at some point this season at that inside linebacker position. But I wanted to ask you, the big talk was Nick Herbig at linebacker and working himself into this starting lineup. He had a tremendous camp, tremendous preseason. They can't ignore Nick Herbig very much longer. I expect him to be on the football a lot more this year, and maybe in future seasons, he's your replacement for an Alex Highsmith. Who knows?
I agree. He has proven himself, even really going back to his rookie year, um, in real games, that he's a force. You got two studs, in Highsmith and Watt, obviously. But they also go so hard that they need breaks here and there. And if you can bring in Herbig on either side, and give your two starters a blow, keeping them fresh for later in the game. That's the one thing that we've seen in Highsmith and Watt. They've been so effective, and rarely do they. This are the Steelers in a situation where they're forcing teams to throw the ball. Two-score lead in the fourth quarter. That has hardly happened, but yet they're so effective. You keep them fresh. You don't lose anything when you bring in Herbig, and that's only going to help what really should be a strength of their team, and that's once again putting pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, Nick Herbig, his stock is rising and rising quickly. Again, I expect to see him on the field in that rotation with Watt and Highsmith quite a bit this upcoming season, and we'll see where that takes us for future seasons to come. I mentioned this last week on the podcast, Dawn, that I think this is a big year for Alex Highsmith. They gave him a big contract last year. His production was down from previous seasons. I think this is a big year for him. TJ Watt's, of course, going to continue to get double, maybe even triple teamed during some of these games, which should open up that other side for a guy like Alex Highsmith or Nick Herbig if he's in the game.
I thought Highsmith. I thought his numbers may have been down, but I thought that he has gotten better each and every year. Remember the days of Bud Dupree. There's a lot of complaints that you see him rushing the quarterback and end up like 10 yards down past the quarterback. But then he sort of came into his own when Watt came into the league. Highsmith has just been steady, and has gotten better and better each and every year. I thought he really stood out the year that Watt was banged up a couple of years ago. So I think that, yeah, could there be a time where Herbig forces their hand and he becomes the starter? Yeah. Could that be as early as next year? Sure. But I'm a big fan of Highsmith, and I think that he's not Watt. There is no other Watt in the National Football League, but he's one you can't fall asleep on because he's very talented.
Absolutely. When you look at the defensive backfield, Don, at corner, of course, Joey Porter Jr. going into his second year. They get Dante Jackson in the trade for Deontay Johnson from Carolina. He's had a good camp, banged up a little bit, but overall, they feel real good about him, opposite side of Joey Porter Jr. And Corey Tice, a guy that they drafted a couple years ago that they were really high on, of course, missed his rookie season with a camp-ending injury from a year ago. They got him back healthy now. They're excited to see him in this rotation as well. And then, of course, Minka Fitzpatrick's still there at safety. Deshaun Elliott they signed, who they're very high up on. And Cam Sutton, we will see Cam Sutton again, who had a very good camp, was very strong, but of course he's suspended for the first 8 games of the regular season. But they'll get Sutton back halfway through the season as well. I think as much as they need another wide receiver, I think they still need another corner too. I think the depth there is a little light.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think the big question is slot corner. That's why they brought Sutton back, and I think Sutton would have fit that role perfectly. He was asked to do something that he's not good at in Detroit, and it didn't work out. But of course, we're not going to have him for half the year because of the suspension. So I'm not sure that anyone really stepped up and grabbed that job by the horns in training camp. That's why I wouldn't be surprised to see them bring in a slot corner before the start of the season over the next few days. That remains to be seen. A lot of, obviously, a great signing of Queen helps in the middle of the defense, helps with overall team speed. But, you know, I thought the Elliott signing, the safety, was very underrated. I think he also helps in that aspect. This defense has gotten a lot faster, in the back seven,
Right.
and Jackson's another one. Everyone's sort of lamenting because of the wide receiver situation. Oh, why do we trade Deontay Johnson? Well, people were lamenting when Johnson was here, but Jackson's a good addition. He didn't have a whole lot to work with in Carolina, but he's got some speed. And him and Porter could be a great 1-2 punch. Time will tell. But they're faster. And if you're expecting that quarterback rush to be as strong as it has been, I think they're in much better shape on the back end to be one of the better defenses in the league.
Don, before now, next Sunday, we'll do our tradition unlike any other when we both sit down and you and I text back and forth and we go through game by game to give our predictions of what the black and gold will do this season. So we won't do that now. We don't have enough time.
We usually, to be honest, to let everyone know, we do that. The win, loss, win, loss, win. We usually end up with the same record, but it's sometimes a different journey that we take to get to that record.
Yeah, we might both say 11 wins, 12 wins, but you're exactly right. At the end, though, it may not be, hey, they're going to sweep Cleveland. No, they're going to sweep Baltimore. No, they're going to take one of two, against the Ravens. So we'll do that here soon, but let's just close it out with our Steeler talk here and just ask you, do you think the Steelers will be a playoff team in 2024?
I do. I know the schedule's tougher, but again, that can change. Everything's based on what these teams on their schedule did a year ago. And as there's always a transition. Teams you expected to be good struggle a little bit for whatever reason. And teams that you really didn't think much of coming in, who thought Houston would do what they did a year ago? So, it's tough to read into that toughest schedule thing because that's always so flux as the season progresses. But I think they have a better roster. I think and especially if they can make a move at wide receiver and bring in a dynamic number two, I think they're going to be significantly better offensively. I still think they're good on the defensive side. So it's a better roster. I know the division is tough. It really is. But I think they'll be I think they're going to be a playoff team, yes.
I said this back in late spring when they went to mini camp. I'm going to stick with it now, too. I think they're a playoff team, contender for the division. But I think they're one big wide receiver away from being in the conversation for a possible AFC conference championship type situation. I really think they're that close. I do.
I agree. I think that I just think that we're above average right now, which gets you into the playoffs. And I know the whole battle cry around here is when are we going to win a playoff game again? I think if they are able to, and I have so much trust in what Omar Khan and his staff have done, that if they can get, whether it's Ayuk or not, I'd love to have Ayuk, but even if it's somebody else, a strong number two, and all of a sudden, I think that they are in the conversation of being one of the top teams in the AFC.
We are talking with Don Rebel of the TribLive High School Sports Network. You can catch Don and his cast of thousands every week, and including every Friday night during the WPIAL high school football season. Don does an excellent post-game show from 9 until about 11 p.m. on TribLive HSSN. Make sure you check it out. Lots of recaps, scores, and more from across the WPIAL. And, of course, part of that as well. Always excited to be with you on a Friday night, Don. Let's switch gears. We have about 10 minutes left with you. Let's talk quickly about high school football. Week 0 last week. For those out there, and by the way, I've got lots of comments here on Oneberg last week. There are still a good handful of folks that don't understand the Week 0 concept that they've been after for a few years. But high school teams have the choice to play a Week 0 game. They don't have to. It's about 50-50. Half choose to have a Week 0 game. The other half choose to have a second
It's
scrimmage.
a lot more than that nowadays.
Is it more than half? Is it?
The first few years, you're exactly right. It was teams could either play a second scrimmage or play a game against an opponent under the lights with the bands and everything going on. This past week 0, which I believe was number 8, the 8th time since the advent of week 0, I think there were only 7 WPL teams that chose to scrimmage instead of playing a game. 2 of them were defending champs, Aliquippa in 4A, Bell Vernon in 3A. Now Bell Vernon's up in 4A. But nonetheless, it's dwindling each and every year or 2 years in the 2-year cycle. More and more teams are just deciding, hey, let's suit up and let's kick it off a week before week 1. So there's week 0.
The participation level is way up with week 0. So we had week 0 last week, but this week, week 1, this Friday night officially kicks off the regular season, if you will, as far as, some teams play conference games in week 1 or week 2. But I'm going to go through classification. We'll start from the bottom and work our way up to 6A. I'm going to throw out a couple teams. Give me your thoughts quickly. Do you think they're the favorite? Are there going to be any surprise teams? Who do you like at each level? Class 1A, Fort Cherry, Clairton, and Southside seem to be the favorites going into the season.
Yeah, I mean, Fort Cherry, Matt Sieg, what he did as a sophomore is incredible. We have seen before that one stud player in the Class A level, if he's surrounded by some good players, really can make the difference in a team being very good and a team being great. Those 3 teams, like you said, Southside made it to the finals a year ago. Watch Neshannock, strong 2A team that is now down in Class A. And another team to watch is Greensburg Central Catholic and Jeanette. I'll throw 2 Westmoreland County teams out there.
Class 2A, Steel Valley, Wash High, and how about Seton LaSalle?
Yeah, I know Brian Davis has made mention of Steel Valley. They lost last week to Clairton. Did we mention Clairton? I think we did in Class A. Steel Valley and Washington play each other this week. So it's, according to our HSSN rankings, number 1, Washington, number 2, Steel Valley. Yeah, the Ironmen lose. They could be 0-2. They'll be all right. Donald Barksdale's a stud for the Ironmen. I think another team to watch is Elwood City. Dan Bradley, formerly of Our Lady of the Sacred Heart, made them a champion, and he's slowly improving things with the Wolverines at the Deer Lincoln High. So that's another team to watch in 2A.
Class 3A, Central Valley, Avonworth, and how about Beaver?
Yeah, Beaver, nice win over Westinghouse. The Bulldogs haven't lost outside of the state championship since 2021, and yet they lost a pretty good Beaver Bobcats team last year or last week. Avonworth, they've been in the championship run for the last half decade or so. Duke Johncar does a great job with that program. I think Central Valley, even though they lost to Montour, a very good Montour team, which we'll talk about in a moment, they're still the cream of the crop, I think, in Class 3A. It's watch Imani Christian. They're coming up from Class A. They were winners last week. They're another team that I think has some pedigree to make some noise in this classification.
Class 4A, Aliquippa, right? The key sport. Thomas Jefferson will try to contend. You mentioned Montour a little bit ago. Bell Vernon moves up to 4A from 3A, the defending WPIAL and PIAA Class 3A champs for the last 2 years. Of course, that game is a week 1 game at the Pit this Friday night. Bell Vernon at Aliquippa. But the Clips still the team to beat in 4A, right?
No question. I mean, even if they went up to 5A, which the PIAA wanted them to, they would have been a legit contender in Class 5A. They have so many weapons. So they're clearly the team to beat. Montour in that same Parkway Conference, though they had a strong year last year, losing only to Aliquippa in the regular season. Then they lost in the WPIAL semifinals. Watch out for Mars. Great, impressive victory last week. They went down to Florida and beat Boone High School. Eric Kasparovich, one of the top coaches in the district, trying to bring Mars their first championship. And you mentioned Bell Vernon back up to 4A. They're back in that conference with Thomas Jefferson. That conference will likely come down to the Jaguars and the Leopards.
Class 5A defending champ Peters Township. What a run they had last year. Defense was phenomenal. Offense also able to put up some big numbers in their passing game. Can anybody contend with the Indians this year? I know Pine Richland's out there as well in 5A.
Yeah, Pine Richland's going to be the favorite in the Northeast Conference. They got a great test coming up on Friday. The Rams playing Central Catholic. You mentioned Peters Township in the Allegheny Six. What a deep conference that is. 5 of the 6 teams were victorious last week. Upper St. Clair has a strong team. South Fayette with a new coach looks like they got a strong team. Moon with a shutout victory over Trinity last week. Bethel Park beat up on Seneca Valley. So that is a strong conference, but Peters Township, the team to beat. Watch out, I will say, in the Big East Conference, watch out for Latrobe. A lot of weapons.
Right.
Latrobe, I think, might end up on top in the Big East. And that's a tough conference with Penn Trafford, Franklin Regional.
Finally, Dawn, Class 6A. They do get 2 additional teams this year. They go from 6 to 8. I know we talked about this in the spring as well. But, hey, Central Catholic and, of course, North Allegheny, always the top at 6A. Can anyone else sneak into that conversation?
You know what? Early days, but Norwin might. They have one of the top quarterbacks, Tristan Tavares, got off to a good start last week, beating rival Penn Trafford in an impressive win. They might be the other team outside of the Big Two. Obviously, we're talking of 2-time defending champion North Allegheny and Central Catholic. But keep your eye on Norwin, one of the new kids on the block. Cannon McMillan, Mount Lebanon, going to be vying. Remember, there's only 4 playoff spots in 6A. I'd be stunned if the Tigers and Vikings aren't in the playoffs. I'm not going to sit there and say 3rd straight year North Allegheny Central in the finals, but that appears to be where we're headed.
Before we let you go, I know you're a Langley guy, you're a City League guy, so all due respect to the City League. Let's talk City League football real quick. I've done many games over the years at beautiful George K. Couple Stadium on the south side. Right. But let's talk City League real quick before we let you go here for the podcast here at the end. Westinghouse, I mean, they've been the story, right? They one of the favorites in PIAA at the 1A level. But how about the City League? Is it Westinghouse to lose in the City League?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think Westinghouse, now they've dropped from 2A to Class A, so they don't have to worry about Southern Columbia anymore if they get that far. But I think Westinghouse is still going to be – I'd be surprised if they don't win the City League. They did the Robinson kid. They suffered a major injury, so that they're going to have to overcome that. But I think they will in the district, and then I think they're going to make some noise in the state playoffs in Class A. University Prep is probably the team that might lock horns with the Bulldogs as far as playing for a City League championship. And don't forget about Alderdice as well.
Thank you, Dawn. Appreciate you coming on the podcast this week. You can catch Dawn Rebel and the cast of thousands, as we like to say, at the TribLive High School Sports Network, TribLive HSSN, each and every week, not just Friday nights, coverage all week long of not just football, but all the WPIAL sports throughout the year. Dawn, thanks for coming on the podcast. Let's get you on again this fall.
Sounds good, Ed. Appreciate it. And thank you for your not only your hard work with us, but your hard work for the city of Pittsburgh and representing the city with all this great sports talk on this podcast.
Great stuff. Appreciate you, my man. That's going to do it for our podcast for this week, for Wednesday, August 28th. For my guest, Dawn Rebel, Ed Troop signing off for now. We'll see you next week right here on our Oneburg Facebook channel, Oneburg YouTube.